This is who we are in El Paso. It's like someone dropped El Paso right in the middle of the mountains, and they are our roots. This is exactly what El Paso is.
In your mind, envision El Paso as one of the great crossroads of the United States. And what El Paso is today, it has been for thousands of years.
Mount Franklin is beautiful. It's the nature, the weather, everything out here takes you away from everyday city life living in El Paso.
We love this old mountain. This is ours, this is home.
There's a special bond between the people of El Paso and their mountains. Living in far west Texas, El Pasoans know the mountains shaped their history and define their lives.
El Paso gold, El Paso gold. Best story ever been told. We love our desert mountains where we give El Paso gold.
If the mountains could talk, they'd tell tales of tin mines and hidden treasure. There are legends of lost gold in El Paso's mountains. The best known is the legend of the Lost Padre Mine. Northern New Mexico in 1680, Pueblo Indians rose up in revolt, driving out Spanish soldiers, settlers, and priests who had claimed their land. The Spaniards fled south to El Paso, bringing church valuables of gold and silver. But even more valuable were Spanish documents, giving the Catholic Church large tracts of land. What the Spanish did next is where the legend begins.
And they got to El Paso, they decided the best thing to do would be to bury the things and quit hauling their valuables around. So they came over here to Mount Franklin and dug out a cave in the mountain. They buried all their stuff, covered it with rocks and dirt, and made it look as much like the surrounding countryside as they could. And the only marker they had was from the old church over in Juarez. They could look, and at a certain time of the day, they could see the sun shining in the entrance to this hole they'd scratched out and where they'd buried their things.
Well, what's your best guess where it might be?
Since the cathedral over in Juarez is kind of this way, it should be on the southwest corner of the mountain here somewhere.
To see El Paso's Franklin Mountains from Juarez, you have to go there. It's a short ride from downtown aboard one of the El Paso Juarez trolleys. Then, a guide showed us around the old mission.
Many people, they were looking for this so-called treasure buried in the Franklin Mountain, but somehow nobody's been able yet to find it.
The old mission of Our Lady of Guadalupe was built years before the Pueblo Revolt. This is where the Spaniards would have sought sanctuary.
And going up here on the old mission of Guadalupe to that tower, exactly when the sun is going just about at the middle of the tower, project a shadow on a spot right at the Franklin Mountain, where is exactly located this treasure.
But a new cathedral built 50 years ago blocks the view the Spanish would have seen in 1680. The next best view is from the top of the new building.
And the lore was that you could see the mine entrance from that church, from the tower of that church. And people for years were going to the church and with binoculars and trying to spot anything they could see that might be a mine entrance. But everyone was, I feel, looking at the wrong place from what I found out later.
The wrong place, according to a man Keller had worked with. He claimed to have had a letter that located the mine on the other side of the mountain, the east side. Most people hadn't looked there. They figured the mission in Juarez wasn't visible from the east side of the Franklins, but it is. The A on the mountain was put there in the 1930s by students at Austin High School, a few blocks away. We took a camera to the top of the A mountain, and sure enough, there was the cathedral in Juarez. Keller remembered hiking into the East Side Canyon with his family.
So I took my wife and 3 sons, and we went up there, and it was eerie. Everything just matched up with the letter perfectly, and the treasure letter spoke of the red gates, and we're walking through this one canyon with 2 red formations, rock formations. You walk right through those, the red gates, and then you went through some footsteps like Oyas type, where water would pool in the rock, and using those for stepping stones. And we went over to this green rock that was described in the letter. And really the area it was a dangerous area. There's a lot of rattlesnakes, and there's a rock slide area there.
Here at the spot where the large rocks seem to stop, just short of a large pile of softer rubble. There's a lot of rockfall down below. Time, gravity, and erosion have covered up a lot of what may have been visible here at one time. Some evidence that there was some excavation going on.
Placement of all these rocks right here on this hillside in this arroyo is not natural. These rocks look like they were fitted together. Furthermore, there's no dirt between the rocks. Mother Nature puts dirt between her rocks. There's none here. So this is a man-made situation.
Now, anyone could go to any site in the world and take notes on the way out and say that's where the treasure was, but it was kind of interesting to see the site.
What makes you think that it's really at that location?
If that letter was real, it matched up. And if you light a fire at that site, you can see the glow of that fire from the church in Juarez.
If you climb above this canyon and look towards Juarez, you can see the general area of the cathedral, the old cathedral in downtown Juarez, possibly have a direct line from there to some point up here on this slope.
There was nothing on this east side of the mountain at that time. It would have been a good place for someone in El Paso to bring something to hide a cache of riches of any sort.
According to legend, there are 300 burro loads of silver bullion in the Lost Padre Mine, along with 4,000 ingots of gold and 5,000 bars of silver. All that and the Spanish land grants. It's details like these that keep people interested in the Lost Padre Mine. But what about caves? Does the mountain have caves large enough for that much treasure?
There are a lot of very small caves that are obvious up here, but to hold the treasures, it would have to be a larger cave. So there's a possibility, in my mind, there's a possibility that if there is a larger cave, there might be some truth behind the Lost Padre Mine legend. Right here at the corner of Murchison and Georgia, it is reported that when a water utilities crew was working here, one of the workers poked through and the bottom gave way from under him. The manhole down was approximately 15 feet. The floor gave way below that. So there were 2 of these people that were working there, and one of them had a flashlight. So they tied a rope around him. They lowered him by rope into this cavern, and he had a flashlight, and he shone the light all the way around. Now, he did see wall in some areas that were around there, but in one direction, as far as a flashlight would shine, there were no walls. So that, along with other reports where people have been into a cavern in this area, kind of backs up that story. And this is basically limestone. The Mount Franklin's areas is limestone. And once you get fracturing in the rocks, water will percolate through there. And because rainwater has a natural acidity to it, it could erode away or wash away and create caverns.
1 block away is a street called Lost Padre Mine. In 1967, the area was being cleared for development when a couple from out of town claimed to know where the Padre Mine was. They got a backhoe and some national attention. But a few days digging turned up nothing, and they left. As for the cavern discovered by the city workers, it was closed up and never explored.
If there is a cavern that's here, I think it'd be a great benefit to the city.
There is something to the legend about caves in the Franklins. A geology group from the University of Texas at El Paso showed us one in the range's northern tip. It was not exactly Carlsbad Caverns.
That last step that you gotta watch out for. Go in here for about 20 feet, then it drops down 4 or 5 feet to a kind of another room, and you got popcorn stalactites all over the walls.
Oh wow! There's a little passageway that goes off right over into here. This I'd call the second room. And now we've got to slide in to get to the third room. This is called the butt crawl here. This passageway is longer than I remember it being. And you see this I'd call like stalagmites or stuff right here. And there I actually did see some water dripping down from the ceiling on a broken stalactite. You know, I'm not sure if it's going to open up to another room. You can see a lot of the red hematite. So I think that this was caused by hydrothermal action, which caused the rock to crack and allow the cave to be formed.
The only tin mines in the United States are in El Paso's mountains. During the early 1900s, they produced about 9 metric tons of tin. Now the mines are part of the Franklin Mountain State Park. They've been covered over for safety, but the shafts are still open, and these man-made caves are big.
And look how deep that is down there.
Yeah, that's got to be 30 or 40 feet down.
Yeah, 13 meters or something like that, you know?
There's faults at a perpendicular angle to these guys. Like this whole face right here seems to be a fault. Maybe they ran down that. Oh wow, I just found a hornet's nest here.
Well, let's leave it alone. All right, check on down here. Look how far that is right down there.
In the breeze.
Try a rock and see how long it takes. That is far.
Yeah, that's like 50 feet down.
Yeah, that's a long ways. Huh. Well, you know, the orientation of the dig was just where the ore was, so, you know, the mineralization of the pegmatite.
Here's the vein. You can actually see the vein. There's quartz.
And look at those purples there. And if this is a druzy surface here.
Yep, absolutely. And look at this red, this translucent red right there, and next to this beautiful quartz. And check this out, this schisty biotite.
All right, here's the end. Really cool. Look, there's a drill hole right there. I guess I didn't find anything more after that. Sometimes at the end you want to see if there's any more of the ore, but I don't really see any.
Nearby, you can walk through the remains of an old tin smelter, also part of Franklin Mountain State Park.
Arguably the most unique feature about the park is the fact that all of the park's boundaries fall within a city's limits, the El Paso city limits. The largest, it's also known as the largest urban park anywhere in the country. The park's elevation ranges anywhere from 4,500 feet up to 7,192 feet at the north peak of North Mount Franklin. That's one of the things that makes this area and this park unique.
I'm standing atop the highest peak in the Franklin Mountain Range. From here you can see the Rio Grande Valley and the cities of El Paso, Texas and Juarez, Mexico. The elevation of North Mount Franklin used to be 7,200 feet. It's now 7,192 feet. The missing 8 feet was knocked off by a bulldozer, and the legend behind that is, unfortunately, true.
I'm sure you thought you'd heard it all about Texas and our tales. Hold on to your hat, 'cause we're changing that on El Paso's mountain trails. Give me the top of Texas any day at all. El Paso is the top of Texas. Come share our mountain jaw.
A developer took it upon himself to blade a road completely across the Franklin Mountains. July of 1978, And that action really galvanized the public. And one thing it did was lead to the creation of a group called the Wilderness Park Coalition that made it its mission to finally get a park established in the Franklin Mountains.
But when we hit them with 15,000 signatures on a petition, boy, their ears perked up. They were ready to listen then. And sure enough, they passed the ordinance. They took in the city limits all the way up to this state line there. They'd cover the whole mountain. And as a result, the mountain was saved.
A state law created the Franklin Mountain State Park in June of 1979.
This is the original legislation. We need to do a little work on the framing. It was 22 years ago that it was framed.
Now the coalition wants to expand the park's eastern slope to include the old Kastner Artillery Range. It's 7,000 acres of desert beauty and deadly explosives.
Kastner Range had 4 decades of operations. We try to ensure the public safety by letting them know that we have many unexploded ordnance still in this area. So that means if you're hiking in this area, you may run across 75mm shells, 3.5mm rocket shells, unexploded hand grenades. It's dangerous.
A bonfire a few years back turned into a range fire and showed just how dangerous.
And the fire got out of hand on a Tuesday, and Thursday the fire burned over the ridge in the background here and came down into this area. I personally heard 43 loud explosions and witnessed some of them right out here in the fields to the north of us.
You've got to remember, not only were small arms fired on the range, well, we had artillery units that were firing cannon projectiles that went over miles. So yes, we're going to find unexploded ordnance in the base of the mountains as well as up on the mountains.
Kastner Range cannot be opened for public parks and wilderness trails or development until the land is cleared. That could cost millions and millions of dollars.
Here we go. Runners, walkers, take your mark. Get set. Have a great time on this.
Every year, hundreds of runners test their endurance on the 12-mile Trans Mountain Challenge. They run up the Franklin's west side, through a mile-high mountain pass, and down to the east side finish line, all within El Paso's city limits.
Way to go, Rick. Rick Gallardo.
Mountain bikers take on the rocky trails within the 24,000 acres of the state park.
This is a very unique place to ride because of the mountain, because of the mountainous terrain and the desert terrain. You know, it provides a terrain that you just can't find anywhere else.
There's trails that go forever. There's about an 11-mile loop that you can go. It's very technical, a lot of steep downhills, rocks, real rocky. I love it. The weather out here, the altitude, it's perfect.
What the state park provides for us is a place that we know is going to be here always, where we don't have to worry about the trails ever being developed commercially. We have a very good trail development program and trail maintenance program for the mountain bike community, as well as hikers. We've got rolling terrain, you know, we've got mountains and hills to climb.
Literally, if I get you on this trail behind me, if you'll go to the other end of the trail and come back on the trail, you can't get lost. That's how simple this 3-miler is going to be today.
You can hike on your own or take a tour with a ranger.
Well, where we are is West Cottonwood Spring, and this is one of the most popular hiking destinations in Franklin Mountain State Park. The attraction here is for one thing, the water. This is a natural spring, and by that we mean that this is a place where water that's sunken into the ground surface makes its way back out. And because of the water being here in what we have basically as the Chihuahuan Desert ecosystem, this is a popular area for people and also for wildlife. All around us here we have cottonwood trees, And later in the spring, in the summertime, they'd be leafed out, and you'd be able to hear the sound of the breeze going through the cottonwood leaves.
Each fall, an event called Celebrate the Mountains brings people to the Franklins.
We get closer to this saddle, you can see it more predominantly. And you can see the vegetation itself, how it gets thicker through that area. And usually in most fault zones, water collects. And you have a lot of vegetation that grows and somewhat spreads, because you have a lot of fracture in that area. And you can even see it up there in the notch, how the accumulation of shrub.
At least as many as 12,000 years ago, there were people here that we refer to as Paleo-Indians, meaning a very long time ago. There are some archaeological sites. There are also what we refer to generically as rock art sites. These include petroglyphs, which are pecked into stone, and pictographs, which are painted on stone.
Design C&D contains stepped or terraced elements similar to designs found on El Paso polychrome vessels.
That one's right over here.
Which is this one. They would date it probably the style of the art itself, a certain Indian tribe.
There's a variety of stories that have to do with the Aztec caves, people living up there. We had the group known as the Desert Archaic, which were probably living in the area between 6,000 and 8,000 years ago. We do know that we had some bones, both what were reportedly human bones, also animal bones, and basketry, limestone hearth material was excavated from Aztec caves.
I just see all kinds of formations up there. I just see all kinds of things that I find that are very attractive. We love this old mountain, and even though it's very sparse, our cattle do well here. This is ours, this is home. It's a way of life that I truly enjoy. We do get some snow. It's certain years, a few years back, we had more snow than they had in Buffalo, New York. But that was a once-in-a-lifetime deal. And it was very early, it was in November. But we'll get some snow here on these mountains, and we like that primarily because when snow melts, it soaks in rather than just runs off. Really helps the vegetation up here.
Hiking isn't the only way to get to the top of the mountain. You can catch a ride on a tramway, too.
The Carlo Wyler Tramway is open to the public again after major renovations. And now it's part of the Franklin Mountains State Park.
The tram was built by a local TV station in the 60s. Tour books say you can see 3 states, Texas, New Mexico, and Chihuahua, and 2 countries, Mexico and the United States. And visitors know the view goes on forever. There, in the distance, more than 100 miles across the desert, is Sierra Blanca and the Apache Summit ski run in New Mexico. From the top of Sierra Blanca, look south, and the Franklin Mountains stretch like a ribbon of stone.
I think we all take the mountain personally. We have our own feelings about it. Most people really like the mountains because it does have beauty, majesty, and uniqueness that not every city has. So it's something we can all be proud of.
The Federal Aviation Administration operates a private tramway in the Franklins.
There's a tram that we have on the mountain, one of only 2 that the FAA owns, and it spans 3,000 feet. It takes them about 12 minutes to go from the bottom to the top, and so they ride up there and carry what equipment that they need to service the communication site on Mount Franklin that is a major asset to the airspace system because of its height. We can get longer range, so we're able to communicate with aircraft at farther distances.
This is the top of South Mount Franklin. From down below, this area looks very small. But once you get up here, you realize these are very big towers.
Yeah, I worked for FAA for 40 years almost.
Did you ever actually just climb this mountain?
Oh yeah, we used to climb every morning from the tram car all the way to the top. It's taken us 2 hours.
Tony Martinez helped build the FAA installation.
What did you find when you first got here?
I found here lots of mountain goats and eagles, also rattlesnakes.
A third tram is operated by a local TV station. That tower overlooks the east side of the Franklins and the last active quarry in the mountain range. Nearby is McElligan Canyon, now a part of Franklin Mountain State Park. El Pasoans have hiked and picnicked there for years. There's an outdoor amphitheater built into the mountain, and the Franklins provide the scenery. A legendary piece of art atop an extinct volcano. This is Mount Cristo Rey, the mountain of Christ the King.
In 1939, internationally known artist Urbici Soler sculpted this figure of huge limestone blocks to carve a 33.5-foot sculpture, making it the largest Christ figure in North America.
Soler also worked on the figure of Christ of the Andes in South America. The top of Mount Cristo Rey is in New Mexico, but its base lies in Texas, Old Mexico, and New Mexico. Thousands of people visit Mount Cristo Rey each year during pilgrimages at Easter time and in October. When artists look at the Franklins, they see different things, including inspiration.
For me, it's the contrast and structure of mass, and I'm a soft light painter, and I love the soft light of the desert, that it has that quality of atmosphere and light. I'm in connection with beauty when I go out there, and for me it's a real religious experience.
El Paso artist Eugene Thurston started painting mountains in the 1920s.
The mountains, wherever Dad went, whether he was in the Southwest or whether he went to Hawaii or wherever he traveled, the mountains were really important to Dad.
The El Paso Museum of Art held a special exhibit of Thurston's work, next to a permanent exhibit of paintings by another El Pasoan, artist Tom Lee. He painted the mountains too and became one of the Southwest's best-known artists. Tom Lee also wrote about the mountains and read some of his work in a 1960s TV special.
Mount Franklin is a presence and a personality. Standing above us, above the build of our town, Mount Franklin is the landmark and the trademark of where we live.
Words from El Paso's Tom Lee. Now the time has come, as it has each year, for you to look to the mountain as they light the star.
Since 1940, the city has celebrated the holidays by lighting a star on the mountainside. Nowadays, the star brightens the night sky year-round. Another holiday tradition in El Paso is the annual Sun Bowl college football game. For this game, an Army parachute team dropped in with the game ball. The Sun Bowl Stadium was built in mountains, surrounded by mountains. Even when obscured by clouds, Mount Franklin is beautiful, but it can also be deadly, as it was in December of 1953, when a B-36 bomber was being delivered to Biggs Air Force Base in El Paso. Bruce Bissonette was a young reporter then. Half a century later, he recalled what happened.
As they arrived in El Paso, there was one of those rare incidents where we had quite a winter blizzard going on. Quite a bit of snow falling, particularly up here in the heights of the mountain. The scene of this mishap, a tragedy at its time, Mount Franklin. I had seen the airplane flying over a short time earlier. It had a drone to it caused by its 6 huge propeller engines and 4 jets, an unusual sound. The plane crashed head-on into the peak just 100 feet or so short of the top, killing all of those aboard. One of the worst disasters in aviation in El Paso's history.
All 9 crew members were killed, wreckage scattered in the mountain's west side. Part of the plane's landing gear and a jet engine are still on the mountain. But the B-36 air crash was not the first on the Franklins. July 1943, these young men were the flight crew and the ground crew of a B-24 Liberator that crashed into the front of Mount Franklin. A few months later, in March of 1944, another B-24 hit Mount Franklin, this one at the base of Ranger Peak. There are legends of outlaws in the Franklins. In 1893, Texas Ranger Charles Fusselman was chasing horse thieves in the mountains when he came upon their camp.
A gunfight immediately started.
Fusselman was shot twice through the head, fell off his horse. The other two lawmen turned around and scurried back, rode back into town, raised a posse. The posse came out the next day. They found Fusselman's body. The cattle were gone. The outlaws were gone. They trailed him up over what was known as Smuggler's Pass, lost the trail.
Where the Texas Ranger died is now called Fusselman Canyon, and what used to be Smuggler's Pass is gone, replaced by a legendary piece of highway engineering, Trans Mountain Road. The first road to cross the mountain was a dirt trail on its southern tip. The mountain and a way around it were important to troops at Fort Bliss.
They would use many times the Franklin Mountains as lookouts. The section of Scenic Drive that we now call Scenic Drive was originally used by the cavalry to many times get on the other side of the mountain from an elevation so they could see what they were getting into when they went around, and then it was only a trail.
These days, Scenic Drive is important to sightseers. There are archaeological sites all over El Paso's mountains, like this small structure built entirely of rocks. It might have been a prospector's shed, judging from the number of nearby mine tailings. In fact, there are many excavations in El Paso's mountains, evidence that people came here in search of something, but who knows what they were looking for or what they found. There are still secrets on Mount Franklin, legends we have yet to learn, legends that are lost for now. But some clues remain.
This seems to indicate that the trail turns at this point with an arrow pointing up the mountain.
A petroglyph on Mount Franklin. Could it lead to a Spanish treasure or tell an ancient tale?
There's some more markings over here that seem to look like bees from this direction, or there's an old Spanish symbol that had the shape of the curved part of a bee, which meant to stop and change direction. When they indicated with one line, that usually indicated a certain number of varas, either between 50 and 100 of these varas, which are 33 1/3 inches. So approximately 50 to 100 meters or so. But who can say for sure?
Sometimes it's easy to find treasure in El Paso's mountains, like the Thunderbird Formation on the western slopes. The red rock was once molten lava from an ancient volcano. To early people, the Thunderbird was a symbol of strength and happiness. Meadows on the mountain's east side turn to gold each spring. Local lore says poppy seeds may have been scattered from a plain or planted by hand. The poppies are another way to find El Paso gold.
El Paso gold, El Paso gold. Best story ever been told. We love our desert mountains, get El Paso gold. El Paso's in the mountains, and the mountains are in our souls. We got the Lone Star of Texas, where we keep El Paso gold. Yes, the gold is in these mountains, birthplace of our souls. And the gold is in the people, in the city of El Paso. El Paso gold, El Paso gold. Best story ever been told. We love our desert mountains, where we get El Paso gold. We love our desert mountains, where we get El Paso gold.